So summer 2004, straight out of school, 17 because I'm a late birthday. Moved straight in with 4 other guys over the summer down at an academy house, one of the Prem clubs, and just sort of cracked on with it, which was really interesting because obviously most people go to uni when they're 18. I was straight out the door, 17, week after exams finished, no study leave, don't pass go, don't have a fun summer.
Hello amateurs, welcome to episode 22 of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some down-to-earth rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host Tim, and today I'm in Canoa, Ecuador, and you might be able to hear the birds chirping and the crashes of the waves from the South Pacific, but I've been working hard all week here building websites for clients. So if you or someone you know needs a website, please do get in touch. hello@amateurrugbypodcast.com. So how good was last week's episode with Dave Phillips? I really enjoyed meeting Dave, and you amateurs seem to like it too, with record download figures. If you're one of the few who hasn't listened to that episode yet, then I urge you to go and give it a listen ASAP. But my guest this week is James Inglis. Jingles and I were teammates at Esher Rugby Club, where I learned from him what it meant to be a really serious rugby player. This interview was recorded in December of 2019, and he told me what it was like to be one of the very first academy players in the UK and the challenges of spending years striving for Premiership rugby. We go deep on one of Jingles' specialist subjects, lineouts, and finish with some great advice around youth development in the modern era. I hope you get as much enjoyment listening to this episode as I did recording it. Please give it up for James Inglis. James Inglis, welcome to the Amateur Rugby Podcast.
Cheers, mate. It's great to be on. Thanks for the invite.
You're very welcome. And I just wonder if you might like to explain where we are at the moment.
Wow, we've somehow managed to land on our feet in BBC London. We're in one of the actual radio recording studios, which is pretty cool. After a little tour of the building and heading downstairs and seeing where the news is filmed. Didn't get a chance to grab a selfie, but
yeah,
I'll take this.
Yeah, we're lucky. We've got if the audio quality sounds remarkably better this week, that's the reason.
It is.
Okay, but let's get into the rugby. Jingles, we met at Esher Rugby Club, and I've told you this quite a few times before, sometimes when drunk, sometimes sober, that you're one of the most professional players that I ever came across in my playing days. And I used to think I took the game really quite seriously, and then I came across people like you, and I realised that there was a whole nother level to this stuff. So I just wanted to hear from you what it was in you that drove you to be that kind of professional as an athlete.
It's a bit of a funny one. I can remember sort of harking back to really sort of under 11 stuff, and my mum would sit me down before every match and just say the word determination, and that's all she used to ever say to me. And I never really understood it at the time, and I don't think I ever paid any notice to her. But I've always been one of those people that wants to do really well for themselves. Right. I'm not that competitive against other people, but it was just being put in that environment with other high-performing guys, and you have the chance to be the best you possibly can be, and you might as well grab it while you're there. So I really did try and do that, even if by the age of sort of 25, 26, I kind of fell out the back of it. But it was really great just to have that opportunity, and actually it was more stuff within me. Like I was one of those guys that didn't mind coming in every Monday morning, seeing how many tackles I missed, seeing how many sort of rucks I was leaning on, all that sort of thing. I actually relished the opportunity to come in and see your stats and see how well you had done, and then work out what you needed to improve. So I really like those conversations with coaches, even if most of the time I wasn't playing for the first team at the major clubs I was at. It was nice to still have those conversations and actually learn what the coaches wanted me to do better. Yeah,
so that you could look at it and improve and hopefully then get that next step.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I've always been quite analytic of my own performance. So even going through school, like whatever I was doing, I always wanted to be the best that I could possibly do. I've heavily modified cars as well. And right. I wanted to have the fastest car of that type in the UK. So I think it just is a little bit within me. Probably come down from my dad a little bit with that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, I was going to bring the car thing up at some point, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe go into that a little bit more, because you're a right sort of petrol head, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, so I would have gone and done engineering at university. Sort of balanced that opportunity with heading off and playing pro rugby for a couple of years. But all that time I was sort of just on the internet, reading books, being a complete nose, getting the reading lists for automotive engineering courses and just sitting at home and reading them, because there's a lot of time to kill as a pro athlete.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time to kill. And you can either go one or two ways. You can either go sit in a coffee shop with the boys, get super good at sort of Call of Duty, or you can do a little bit of studying and better yourself. I think a lot of the guys these days are better at doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when I sort of jumped on the bandwagon of being a pro athlete back in the day.
Yeah, what sort of year was that?
2004.
Yeah.
So summer 2004, straight out of school, 17, because I'm a late birthday. Moved straight in with 4 other guys over the summer down at an academy house, one of the Prem clubs, and just sort of cracked on with it, which was really interesting, because obviously most people go to uni when they're 18. I was straight out the door, 17, week after exams finished. No study leave, don't pass go, don't have a fun summer. Although we still did all right though.
So what was that like? That first year of being in a Prem academy, living with your mates, I'm guessing. Did you know those guys before, or was it something that
we knew some of them, because obviously I'd been part of that club for a couple of years. We did sort of training camps, and we used to be based on an army base. We used to go down there, stay down there in a half term or a Christmas or an end of term or something like that.
Okay.
Real kind of horrible digs, like army recruits. We watched the boys get off the buses and be getting told to do push-ups with their rucksacks on their back and stuff like that. And we're just thinking, oh my God, what have we dropped ourselves in here? But we did get a house together. So we knew some of them beforehand, didn't know some of the other guys. But that was at the start of when things were going professional for the academies.
Okay.
It was 2 years after England academies formed, and I think it was the first big intake that particular club had of academy boys.
So there was a feeling out process, I'm guessing, and
yeah.
What were the sort of challenges that were forthcoming in that year, and what kind of things did you think they got right, and maybe some of the things that they definitely got wrong?
Look, I think everyone was learning back at that time. Like a lot of clubs had gone professional, had a big boom, spent a load of money on cash, cars, whatever else for players, thinking it was going to take off like football. After a couple of years, suddenly realised it probably wasn't going to do that. But you also had all the clubs had their own academies at that point, until England Rugby took over and said, well, actually, we should probably have some sort of proper player pathway that we're in control of.
Yeah, right.
So going in that first year, there was a huge intake. There was, I think, 11 or 13 of us in that first year, which meant that we didn't train with the first team at all. We just trained with ourselves.
Okay.
So that was pretty brutal, because you're training 5-6 days a week, because sometimes you aren't playing. You had the old Premiership 21s league, the 19s league. Some guys were going off and playing representative stuff for England 18s, England 19s and things. But you're just smashing each other most of the time, most of the days.
Right.
And then when the first team players do come over, it was a little bit old school in those days. You kind of have to earn your dues. So they would give you an absolute ragging as well. So if they ever came over, tried to help you out with a session, you'd be doing contact for a good 30, 40 minutes while slogging it out with a guy that you're living with. Plus, you're doing that every single day.
Yeah, that sounds pretty brutal. One of the criticisms that's come up for the academies is the amount of meaningful game time for the young guys there. What was it like then? Did you get plenty of game time at the right sort of level?
I think the first year we did, because there was still a 19s and 21s league. So when we were all straight out of school at under 19s, actually all the academy players were playing 21s. So we had that kind of step up. And then I went off and played representative stuff. So I went and played England 19s, went through all of that. So I had quite a lot of good game time. Plus, you get the occasional second team match. But the squads were a lot bigger, and the first team squad didn't really look to the academy too often.
Right.
It was only really where they needed to plug a hole would they reach down and grab an academy boy and bring them up. So there was some game time available, but you had to be lucky in where you were selected. And I imagine at other clubs it was completely different. So going off to 19s was good, but I know another guy that was in the same position as me that didn't get selected for England 19s that year. He got the opportunity to go to New Zealand, and another guy went to the Natal Sharks in South Africa.
Right.
So there were opportunities, but I think you just had to be lucky with contacts and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Just going back to something you said earlier about analysing your own game as a player, and I think I'm quite similar in this. Obviously, rugby's probably the ultimate team sport. But within that, there's so much that you can do yourself. And I always consider myself in some ways a selfish player, because I really look to myself as being how to make the best of myself. And then hopefully that would affect the team in a positive way. Is that similar to your mindset in that?
Yeah, I guess I knew what I was good at, and I was good at defence, lineouts, scrummaging, mauling, that sort of stuff, hitting
Yeah.
rucks. So I knew I'm a big lumpy second row. I knew what I was there to do. I wasn't great at ball carrying.
Yeah.
So I used to let guys. I didn't used to steal lines. Where some guys you play with, you're just like that one opportunity you did have to carry the ball, and someone always gets in front of you.
Yeah.
But I knew what I was good at, so I made sure I was the best I possibly could at all of those things. Went to a talk from an ex All Blacks coach. He said everyone's going to be good at that level, the level you're playing at. And he said, your strengths are going to make you stand out, but also make sure that you don't have any ridiculous weaknesses.
Sure.
So whatever you're really good at, keep on making that your strength. Don't try and balance your game so you're the well-rounded player, because you'll then never stand out. Always concentrate on your strengths, but plug those weaknesses as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point in terms of coaching, because actually when I became a coach, I actually did the opposite. I tried to bring everybody up, take all their levels up a little bit, and I didn't concentrate on people's strengths, which is a learning point for me, but it's probably a good learning point for other people as well. So talking about one of your strengths there, this is a memory that I've got of us on the pitch together, and also kind of indication of your professionalism. It was a away game at Bedford, and I'd made a tackle or something like that, and the ruck had gone on beyond me, and I was trying to get back on side. And as I did so, Carl Dixon was playing scrum half for Bedford that day, and I basically ran across you. He ran behind me and kind of just ran through and scored. And I remember the look you gave me was incredulity or something like that. It was like absolute disgust that I'd managed to get in the way. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. that might have been a game when I was trying to... Was it the game where we went down last game of the season?
Yeah.
Last game of the season. So I was probably trying to make sure my back didn't fall out my arse, because I'd hurt it, and I was only really playing. And if you remember, I came off after 40 minutes because the game was done. We were absolutely thrashed by Bedford. There was no chance we were going to do anything.
Yeah,
I had to stand up all the way there to stop my back locking up. I was constantly getting massages on the coach on the way there. So although I obviously do give you a look of disgust, it hasn't stuck.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we talked a little bit about Premiership academies there, but then you spent quite a bit of time playing in the Championship, including clubs like Cornish Pirates and Esher, and I know you had a good time down at Pirates, so I just wonder if you'd like to sort of say a little bit about that club and what made it an enjoyable experience for you.
Yeah, obviously, so the Prem club I was at was Quins. I was at kind of in Surrey's set up for a little bit, went to Quins when I was 16, signed a academy contract for Quins when I was 16, played England 19's first year, second year of being professional, went down to Cornish Pirates, had a great time down there. It's such a close-knit club. I think you have to be when you're going down there. It's one of those things that everyone's in the same position. You get that with a lot of rugby clubs, though. And I know, speaking to other guys that have gone to Jersey or just other clubs overseas, rugby tends to attract good people. So you go down there and you will already know that most of the guys you're talking to on that first day are just good blokes.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to get along with them. They've probably been in a similar position in the last couple of years, going down to Penzance. There was very few players, actually, that were born and bred Cornish boys.
Okay.
But it is literally end of the train tracks, right the way down in Penzance. I got put on loan down there in October and came back at the end of the season.
Okay.
And I don't think there was a sunny day while I was down there. From October to the end of March or end of May, there wasn't really a sunny day. And that was hard, but actually the boys down there were great, and we did everything together. And that was when I probably had too many cups of coffee with the boys and chilled out a little bit too much. But it was easy when you're down there. But I think that closeness you get when you put a load of guys together, you're left to your own resources, so you just hang out together the whole time. It's easier. Well, I imagine it's easier for the coaches because you don't have to build that culture. It's kind of already there.
Yeah.
You've already bought into something because you've travelled how many hundreds of miles to go down there. And you're like, yes, I'm going here. I want to play for Pirates. And despite the setup was absolutely terrible, given that we played at Camborne's ground, so home matches were on a Sunday, which meant no social life on Fridays and Saturdays. Any away matches, closest to away matches, were Plymouth and Exeter. After that, you got 7 hours to London, which made some great coach rides back. But I mean, yeah, it can be a lonely old place when you're all that way down there.
Yeah.
Especially as at certain times of year, like everyone disappears and goes back home. So if you're that one player that is down there, you're sort of stuck down there twiddling your thumbs and waiting to know when this beautiful Cornish sun shines.
And where were you living when you were down there? In Penzance or?
Yeah, we the first time. So I literally got a call from my agent saying, "Oh, there's an opportunity to come up. It's a really good opportunity, James. Opportunity to go down to Cornish Pirates, play load Championship rugby." Be one of the youngest second rows in that league, and one of the other guys is going off to the World Cup, so you'll get loads and loads of game time. I was like, okay, perfect, thinking, yeah, this is set up for a couple of weeks' time. Like, yeah, of course, Dick, yeah, that sounds good. Tell Quins, yeah, I'm up for that. He's like, okay, pack your bags, you've got to be down there for training tomorrow afternoon. I was like, brilliant. Hang on, what? So we got the call Friday morning and was down there Saturday afternoon for training.
Wow.
Yeah, chucked everything in the car that I could, got down there. Luckily, one of the other Quins boys had been put on loan since the start of the season, so that was and we got in a house together. But the house was a holiday let that was only meant to be let in the summer, so no heating.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was interesting times. It was interesting times.
Yeah.
So I was living out of a suitcase for 3 months while someone else's house was getting sorted, and then we eventually all moved in February. But it was brutal 3 months down there to start with.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you mentioned some of those long coach journeys. Was there any kind of coach culture that Pirates had? And I think you know roughly what I'm referring to here.
Not as much as other teams that I've been at. It was quite sensible because every single away trip's quite long.
Okay.
It is like a mini court session on the way back on every single one, but things didn't get too silly on most of them. There was no skydiving for guys that know what that is. No skydiving on those buses, because also the thing you had to manage was the toilet capacity was only a certain size. So it was effectively a bladder buster. You had to drink as much as you can and pee as least as possible. Otherwise, you'd max out the toilet, and then the driver would have an absolute barmy. And it's not a good situation to be in, filling up bottles rather than the toilet. Yeah, for sure. I see what you mean about the fact that if every away trip's a long one, then it's not anything special. Yeah. And I think that's what you get drawn into, certainly with other clubs that I've been at. That big long away trip is look forward to. It's like the first fixture you look for. Yeah, recently Wharfdale away's always been a good one, because you know you're getting the coach back. You're not going to get told off by anyone else on a train carriage. You got a whole coach to yourself for sort of 7 hours. So we're playing in Roslyn Park. They looked after us quite nicely with the coaches.
Right.
So we had one of those big round tables at the back where play poker on the way up there and have a good skinful on the way back.
Nice. But it was just one season at the Pirates, wasn't it?
Yeah, one season at Pirates, because I was signed at the time for 2 years to Quins.
Yeah.
Pirates wanted me to go back. I wanted to go back. And as always happens in rugby, Quins going, no, we're definitely going to play you next year. You're going to be our third or fourth choice second row alongside so-and-so. And you're thinking, oh, okay, brilliant, I've got a shot. And then the new season starts and they bring in 2 new second rows. So, but that was then when I got put on loan to Esher. So that's where we then met. Yeah,
but these decisions that you make throughout the career, that they can go any direction really. And I think there's players throughout the Championship who just yearning and desperately trying and working hard to get up to the Premiership, and it doesn't happen for a lot of people. But yeah, the silver lining was playing at Esher, which was a wonderful time. What were some of your highlights from there?
First initiation. So I hadn't really had an initiation before. We'd had sort of court sessions at Quins, and you always, as academy boys, you have to give out the drinks and basically be everyone's waiter. But we never really had an initiation until you left. So it was more like a leave-in punishment more than anything. So Esher, first away game, on your knees, top off, can of beer, sort of, what's your name, clubs you played for, what did you do well today, what didn't you do well, and see the can off. So that was great. And then first home game, straight in the bar afterwards, pint of Guinness and a double whiskey, which was unheard of after a Quins match. But the hilarious thing was the Quins Academy coach was coaching at Esher Backs at the time, Colin Osborne, great coach, and he was trying to shepherd all the academy boys off from basically getting involved with that culture. But we sort of snuck through, and the old Esher captain Duncan Cormack was having none of it. He definitely involved us.
Well, I think it's really important because you could go through, and if you're an academy lad and then go straight into the Premiership, you could miss out on all of that. And that's one of the things I think this dual registration system is really good for, to make sure the guys do get that kind of traditional rugby grounding.
Yeah, it's weird. I always describe it to people, because you talk to people that play rugby at quite lower leagues or have seen what rugby guys are like at lower leagues, and you try and explain to them the kind of further you go up. Well, this is my experience. The further you go up the leagues into Premiership, the less horrible the initiations and just drinking culture in the club is, and the less like you are to end up taking your clothes off at the end of the night. Essentially,
it's just like a sliding scale.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one having that dual registration, because obviously that was part of the England Academy thing. They wanted those guys to get some game time, and it was great that we could get game time. I got some game time at Pirates, got game time at Esher, played like most of my pro rugby in the Championship or old National One. So, but it wasn't managed very well at the time from the actual coaches.
Right.
And it was a case of, you got to prove yourself, you got to sort of pay your dues. So you'd have Monday would all be a light session at your Prem club. Boys that hadn't played at the weekend would train in the morning. Everyone would train in the afternoon. It'd be a light skill session. Tuesday was usually getting more physical. You'd probably do forward units, some sort of contact, your big weight session, probably full smash in the afternoon. Wednesday, a bit of a down day, a lot of video analysis, ready for Thursday, more meetings, more kind of run through, short, sharp stuff, but still some power and contact in there. And of course, you're mixing all of that in with training Tuesday with your club, with your loan club, Thursday with the loan club, and playing Saturday at your loan club. I think it was only after the first couple of years that they worked out, oh, hey, these academy boys are actually playing Saturday as well, so maybe they should have Monday morning off rather than just smashing us the whole time.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, my body started to fall to pieces, and a lot of the other guys that I grew up with had injuries quite early on, and it wasn't anything like a major impact injury that you can't really deal with. It was just fatigue and not balancing ourselves. And S&C back in those days wasn't all it is cracked up to be now. They didn't really look after you. They just loaded more weight on.
Yeah.
Is essentially what happened. It was either guys that didn't really know what they were doing, didn't really know the science behind it, could coach perfectly good actual weightlifting technique, but then couldn't manage you over a season. So a lot of the guys ended up picking up niggles, which they never really got rid of. I'm thinking of guys like George Robson, Jordan Turner-Hall with his hip. Chris Robshaw had a load of ankle and knee injuries growing up, and they're still struggling with those things today. I mean, Jordan retired from his hip injury a couple of years back now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think things have improved a lot though since then, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think when I was sliding out of it at the age of sort of 24, 25, out of the sort of Prem setup, that's when there was a sudden influx of all those guys that had done sports science. It was actually more of a science then. They were looking at kind of the strategic vision of what's happened over a whole season, managing players, looking at players' individual RPEs and stuff like that, just to make sure that individually you are looked after. Whereas before that, it very much used to be your own responsibility. If you wanted to do extras, you could go do extras, or there may be a fat club that you're not invited to, but you probably should be in it, so you should turn up to it. And it was weird. They didn't tend to look after the academy boys in the same way, but I don't know if that's at Quins because we had such a big full-time academy.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'll always try and look at these things as obviously this is the Amateur Rugby podcast, but professionalism's come in and it's brought a lot of good things. And I think this is slowly funneling down, right? So it seems to have that element of the game is now kind of figured out pretty much, I think, at the top level. Yeah. And it's slowly getting funneled down to the lower levels of the game. So now you see players at level 4 or 5 or whatever with actual good weight programs that are sensible and make sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just all trickled down, hasn't it? So when I was first playing at Cornish Pirates, that was probably a worse standard of rugby than my final years at Roslin Park,
right? Who
are now National One, and they're doing quite well at National One. But that's from all those players having all those players come through that academy system and needing to find somewhere to play. Yeah, some guys obviously fallen by the wayside, but a lot of them are still playing in some form or another. And that's the great thing about being around London is there's so many of those sort of Championship National One clubs. You can kind of get away with having a job and playing. I think it gets a little bit harder the further you go down the leagues and the further away you get from like a major city. But it's definitely had a huge positive impact because those guys that are doing apprenticeships in for the S&Cs for the Premiership clubs are often also involved in those Championship or National One clubs. So it's just that nice trickle down effect, and I think in that respect it has worked from a top down model for the RFU, bringing in those, funding those academy players, and then having it all trickle down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that is a concern from the professional game is the academy guys who don't make it then just quit the game completely and disappear out of the pipeline, out of the game. And obviously, playing numbers generally are just slowly on the decline, I think, in the men's game. But you never thought about that. You never thought about, because by 25, 26, you hadn't made it to the Premiership, but you never thought about quitting then, or
I took a whole year out. So I got really fed up, but not with rugby and Premiership and how it all works. But it can be a really cutthroat sort of industry to be in. And I'll come back to something that you brought up a little bit earlier. But I did take that year out because mentally I needed it, physically I needed it, and it's an identity thing as well. And I got asked this at the first interview that I went for a proper job.
Yeah.
No, at that time, no one thought rugby was a proper job. So I was sat in an interview and someone said, "Oh, what's the hardest decision you've had to make?" I said, "Well, it's this, because my identity and everyone knows me as a rugby player. Like, that's what I've done." And it's not from when you're a pro rugby player, because this goes way back before that. If you're going to sign a pro contract at 18, you're a decent rugby player and you've probably played representative stuff. You're known for being a rugby player. You might have been a rugby captain, or you're at a school that's known for rugby. So that's kind of your identity. That's what you've done. That's what you've done Tuesday, Thursday nights. That's what you've done every single weekend. You've looked after yourself. You haven't gone out. You've been a rugby player. So everyone knows you as a rugby player. So then to in one decision go, I'm going to have a different identity, or I am more than just a rugby player, is actually quite a big thing to do. And jumping back, I was actually with Rob Anderson just before Christmas, who's a guy that we played with at Esher. He played at Roslyn Park and then Jersey. He was involved with Wasps for a bit and maybe League Tykes. He played, and we played against a guy called Keenan Mile, who's recently come out and had managed to get through some really tough times. And I didn't know Keenan's story at the time when talking to Rob. And we were kind of going through all those guys we used to play with. And I said to Rob, "Do you know a guy that I always really, really respected was Keenan?" Because like me, he played in a lot of Championship sides. I'm not going to try and name all the sides he played in, but he was definitely playing. He was definitely playing at Leeds, and he was playing to roughly the same age I was, and hadn't made Prem. But he kept on at it. Whereas actually, I took the easy decision and went, "No, I'm going to go do something else." Whereas he carried on plugging away at it. And I was thinking of this from, he then made Prem, played Wasps, had a really successful career. It was only recently I found out that he actually really struggled with the whole thing. I think I've actually toyed with the idea of messaging him on Instagram, and I've for some reason I've never done it, but I think this is maybe a good like media to just say well done.
Yeah.
Because I took the easy decision. I got out and kind of got tough a little bit, and he carried on doing it. And I was saying to Rob that really a lot of respect for the guy. Yeah,
that takes a huge amount of effort to just keep going, because I mean, like you just said there, you've spent well over 10 years, probably getting close to 13, 14, striving and trying to make that with that your end goal. And at some point you've got to kind of say, well, that's enough. Maybe I'm never going to make it, and maybe that's the time.
Yeah, it was so the time I did it, I had a foot injury. I was on loan to Esher. I was still signed at Quins. Came back from, before that actually. So I had to have back surgery. Had back surgery, hadn't signed with anyone. Got back fit myself from back surgery. Luckily, there was a lovely thing called combined insurance back in the day.
Yeah.
So got back fit by Christmas. Quins re-signed me. I then injured my foot in a training session with Quins, and then re-injured it playing against London Scottish for Esher, because I got put back on loan to Esher.
Yeah.
And then re-injured it after that season at a trial for Wasps, essentially. And it was at that stage I kind of went, look, I've had back surgery. I'm about to go for a second op on my foot. I've had all these other problems. At some point, you've just got to go, my body's not possibly made to do this day in, day out, because I was having shoulder issues, having back issues. And it was at that point where Wasps called me up and said, we're going to give it a rest for the moment, like go get yourself fit, and then you can come back and we'll maybe have a look at you in our second team.
Yeah.
And to me, that was going, yeah, we don't really think you're good enough, which is fine. And looked at the situation at Esher, thought, yeah, you could live on the money you're getting playing Championship, like that's absolutely fine. But are you always going to be comfortable? You're never going to end up putting anything away like those boys are that are earning more money in the Prem. And at the time, if you wanted to then step back up to Prem from Championship, you usually also had to take a cut in contract.
Yeah.
So you'd be a top Championship player, earning probably decent money and having quite a nice life. But taking that step back up into Prem, the Prem clubs are always like, well, we're taking a chance on you, so we're going to sort of cut you a little bit, unless you're an absolutely fantastic player that's come up. But I was already 25, like a couple of clubs had a look at me. So it was at that time that I thought, do you know what, I'm going to reassess and do something else, because I knew having another surgery on my foot meant I was going to be out for another 9 months. So I did go back and play at Esher right at the end of the season, but I did also use that 9 months to hit up all the old sponsors, go into the city as everyone was doing that time. But I found that I didn't want to sit in an office. It was essentially what I learned from that.
Right. Okay.
And I did some quite cool stuff. So all the usual stuff: insurance, reinsurance, banking, sales, HR. I also then worked at a supercar club,
Right.
which was across the road from Esher, which is quite good fun.
I didn't know that. What did you do for them?
So, bit of a weird. I was kind of just a guy that was in there because I had a couple of contacts in the sporting world. They wanted to move into sports and sell memberships to the sporting guys. So the idea was that I would use a couple of my contacts, go around a couple of the clubs with the cars, and try and get a couple of people to sign up. But I mean, it would have been better. It's a lot of money. it's a lot of money. I mean, you're paying sort of 15 grand for what is membership, where you can take a supercar out every single weekend of the year. Okay. But it's still a lot of money for 52 days of a supercar.
Yeah. For sure.
If you look at it like that.
Yeah.
But it was good fun because I'm not sure I'm allowed to tell the story, but you can cut it out afterwards.
Okay,
so
we'll see.
The supercar club was on an industrial estate, which was right next to the UK's biggest, let's call it speciality filming studios.
Okay.
And in these speciality filming studios, you had a lot of women coming in, getting changed and doing various things. And they noticed that we had all the supercars parked next to their studios. And there was a joint venture where they came over and shot all the covers for all their new films that year, right, using the supercars. And my job was to make sure none of the supercars got scratched that day with diamantes and heels, and I'll leave the rest up to the imagination of the listeners. But that was an interesting day.
And you got paid for that?
I got paid for that.
That's amazing. Is that your best job ever?
Well, I was having to buff marks off of cars for the whole day, while awkwardly talking to women that maybe weren't wearing very many clothes. So it was an interesting day. Yeah, it was an interesting day.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's rewind off that subject a little bit and just go back to the injuries that you mentioned there, because actually thinking back to when we were teammates, I don't think we actually played that many times in the same team. You were injured quite a lot. I was selected half the time or whatever. So what, I mean, you mentioned your back and various other bits. It sounds like the amount of pressure your body got put through during that academy time might have had quite an effect on your body. And would you think that's correct, or?
Yeah, I think it was probably a combination of things. So it was the whole package. It was at the time, not coaches at Prem clubs or the academy managers not having a really good overview of that whole season. What was happening with the academy players and how did that fit in with the first team players and everyone's training schedule? Yeah. So it was often and at the time, the gyms weren't big enough, so you couldn't have whole squads in there, or you would have to split up forwards, backs, academies. Academies always got shafted and put in early, so you were getting up really early, probably having trained till 10 o'clock the night before sometimes, so you're going in for your major weight session, having done a full smash session for an hour and a half, because if the Prem clubs were old school at that time, Jesus, the Championship clubs were definitely old school at that time. Yeah. So it was just the whole picture of more weight on the bar, physios trying to get the SSE guys to listen and say, these guys need to do this. But it was, as I said earlier, it was really down to you looking after your own body, you controlling your extras. But then that also starts to eat away at that team ethos of, well, hang on, some other guys are doing all those weights and are doing extras and are doing this, but you're not. And it's like, yeah, but I've been on loan for the last 2 weeks, whereas he hasn't because he's been 23rd man, that sort of thing. So it was just having a better picture. But I don't think the backroom staffing at the clubs back in early 2000s was what it is today. You don't have the sheer number of guys that are temping doing S&C stuff. That was all sort of coming in when I was just getting out of it sort of in 2010, 2011.
Yeah, because there's definitely, and I'm guessing it's the case then, that there's this kind of macho thing going on as well, where if you see somebody else doing something, you think, right, well, I've got to do that now. Otherwise, I'll be seen to be letting the team down or not doing as much. And it's probably just a personal pride thing as much as anything as well.
Yeah, definitely. But you had guys that were in control, and the guys that had already proved themselves and were playing regularly first team. And they were going, oh, I'm not going to do this training session, but I am going to go to my own sprint coach in the afternoon. You're like, okay, cool. And so as a player, I'm like, well, I did training last night. And they're like, no, you lift that sort of thing. It's like, oh, I've also got a bad back and I'm not meant to lift overhead. And they're like, oh, well, this is the program for everyone. We can't modify it for one person unless you're injured. So that was kind of the thinking back in when I was at Quins was that they only looked after you with individual programs if you were injured. Otherwise, you were following what everyone was programmed to.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had a rollover of S&C coaches over the years, but I think they've definitely got it right now with the guys that they've got in. And that those guys were there in that time that I was just talking about in the late 2010s, but they were working with the academy, and that's when I actually managed to progress to first team at some point.
Right. Okay. Cool. So, you mentioned about playing at Rossin Park there. So you did, even after that year of having off and trying to get yourself fit and stuff like that, you carried on playing after that, right? You stayed at Esher for a little while?
Yeah, I came back to Esher right at the end of the season when they were still in champ. I always get confused about this. I can't remember if that's the year we stayed up or if that's the year that we dropped 5 places and went into what is now National 2. I can't really remember how it worked. But yeah, went back to playing. Hadn't played, trained, done anything for a year. Managed to sort my body out, but definitely wasn't rugby or match fit.
Yeah.
Rang up our old friend Mike Schmidt. Said, "Oh, is there any chance I can come down and start training again?"
Yeah.
Turned up on the Tuesday, training session, absolutely knackered. Get a call Thursday lunchtime. Hey, Jingles. Mate, we're seeing if you can play this weekend. I'm like, yeah, I haven't played in a year and a half, Schmitty, but I mean, I'll do my best. What are we talking about? Like, I'll just sit on the bench. He's like, well, no, what we're going to do is we're going to start you, and then you'll go for as long as you can, and then we'll just pull you off. So, like, just put in whatever you can, and then we'll bring on whoever. So just do a good sort of 20, 25 minutes. I was like, okay, sweet. Schmidt, I think I can get through that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
You're still using all the lineouts I wrote for you 2 years ago anyway, so we're all good with that. So I get on, 25 minutes comes, I'm like, Schmitty, done. Literally, I'm the guy on my knee taking the Kit Kat every 5 minutes, like doing the throat cut sign. I go, Schmidt, I'm done, mate. And he's like, no, 5 more minutes. And of course, you get to 30 minutes. He's like, no, mate, just go to half time. I end up playing the whole bloody match. I was, one of the most knackered I've been. And then I didn't play for 2 weeks after that because obviously I was too unfit to play that 80 minutes. My body was just in pieces, so all my shoulders are absolutely battered and bruised. But yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned lineouts there, and this was something that was definitely a key part of your game. So what was some of the things that went into lineouts that you think are really key to making them successful?
I think the biggest mistake people make when looking at their lineout moves is not thinking, how would you defend against that? So what's your initial setup? How would you defend against that initial setup? Are you going to move before you actually make a call? So have you got like a 1-3-1 line out that's then going to change to a 2-3 line out or a 3-2 line out? What picture are you showing the opposition, and how are they going to defend that to start with? And also, what level are you at with that? So are we schoolboy? Are we tier 1, tier 2, or Prem, Champ, Nat 1? Like, what's the other team doing? Do they have video analysis? Do they have your old matches? Are they going to be expecting to see the same setups that you showed them in your old matches, and you're going to then change the picture? I think that's one of the biggest, most important things is, what is the opposition expecting to see, or what are you expecting to show them? Because if you can get that right and work out roughly how they're going to defend against it, that's when you can start opening up holes.
Right.
Whereas if you just go in and go, oh yeah, I saw like this really good move at the weekend run by a Prem club on TV, and run it, and you're in a league where they haven't got video analysis, and they're probably just going to put up front and middle, or middle and back, depending where they are on the pitch, or they're going to have a 2 metre area where their pod's going to mark, then that move might not work whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, you're taking a move that's been carefully constructed by picking apart all those things over and over again. I mean, that's why video guys have their jobs, and that's why you've got multiple video guys in Prem these days. And line out coaches, all the guys that are calling know exactly what they're doing. They've been watching it for ages. So it's not the same line out for every single match. It's what picture are you showing the opposition, and what are they expecting to see, and what are they going to do. So I think a lot of people plan their own line outs without thinking how the opposition are going to defend it. So if you're in a league where you know that the opposition probably only have got 2 videos of you, what did you do in those when you played them last year? What did you play, or what did you do when you played them earlier in the season? How did they defend that, and what are they expecting you to do off that?
Yeah.
And then you can sort of add things or build on that. But if you know you're in a league where most of the time they're going to defend front and middle in certain areas of the pitch, or middle and back in other areas of the pitch, you can start working around that. Because obviously, main priority for a line out, win the ball where the backs want you to win it.
Yeah.
Then if you can't do that, win the ball. You can't do that cleanly, just make sure the ball comes back on your side. And that's why I tell all the guys I'm coaching, is that's your order priority. But it's a delicate balance. And you have, if the backs are asking for it off the top at the back the whole time, which they probably are, then you may not be able to deliver that to them.
Yeah.
And it's more important you just win the ball.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Again, depending on what the opposition's doing, right?
Depending on what the opposition's doing.
So you're saying basically there's a real foundational planning part there that a lot of people probably miss in terms of just thinking about what the opposition is going to do in response to how you set up.
Yeah, exactly. So depending on what league you're in, like, you might know that, for instance, how do you tell your guys to defend most weekends? Do you say, oh yeah, give them the front in their own 22, and then or let them have the front in their own 22, or let them have the back in their own 22 to try and make them overthrow it? Are you going to let your guys roam? Like, what are you doing with your line-out pack? Is that probably quite similar to what other teams are doing in your league? Most likely.
Probably is, yeah.
Probably. And what, if at all, have you got video analysis? Do you video your own matches? Yes, then they've probably got last season's game against you and this season's game against you. And if you've shown them the same picture in those last 3 matches, then they're probably expecting something quite similar. And so then that gives you an opportunity to actually change it.
Yeah, and again, this is another trickle-down thing from the professional game. More and more now, and lower, people are looking at videos and trying to figure out how teams operate in certain areas of the pitch, which I personally think is a good thing. I think, I love the analytical part of the game. So it's interesting that that's trickled down.
Look, it's not even trickled down into just the league stuff. I mean, school games. One school I was at, we were videoing every single A team at every age group, from under 11s through to under 18s.
Wow!
And we also used to have a couple of roaming cameras where guys could go, oh, can I video the B team this week, or could I video the C team this week? And then that brings in a really nice element, because it lets those guys that maybe weren't that hooked on playing rugby, or that maybe they're a C team, they're massively overperforming, or they are playing some great rugby. It lets you then show that to the rest of the school.
Yeah.
And if you're working on something like key performance indicators, then actually your team of the week, rather than just being the team that thrashed the opposition the most, because all that's an indicator of is the opposition weren't any good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you might have played well at the same time, but most of the time it's more of an indicator of how good the opposition were. So it might give you that under 14 C team that opportunity to be team of the week, because they met all their KPIs the most.
Yeah. It's amazing. All the way down into under 11.
All the way down. Yeah, but you have to have some time to do the coding as well.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, you've kind of led me into this now, and that's what you're doing now, really. You're a rugby coach at school.
Yeah, so I transitioned into rugby coaching, basically, by doing all that stuff that I told you, doing everything in the city, working at a supercar club. I worked out I didn't want to sit behind a desk, and actually the whole time I was coaching. And my partner's mum at the time turned around to me and said, why don't you just do coaching?
Yeah.
And that never really occurred to me. Because I had always I saw guys come out and then go to adult clubs, and I didn't really want to do that setup. I wanted something that was going to keep me busy all the time during the day.
Yeah.
So she said, look, there's an opportunity that's come up at the school. Why don't you go for it? And it was sports club manager, but it meant that every afternoon I was out coaching. During the day, I was also going to be head in S&C. So I ended up installing a new S&C facility there,
right?
Which is great fun. And the nice thing about that school was, at the time, there were 2 other guys that had just come out of pro rugby.
Right.
So it was a really good culture to be in, and it meant that we could easily move a lot of the stuff over from the professionalism of what we did a couple of years ago straight into that school system.
Right.
And it meant that there wasn't any culture clashes because there was 3 of us doing it. There was enough for us to answer questions, and we could bounce off each other
And support each other as well.
And support each other. And luckily, one of the guys was the director of sports, so he controlled the cash flow, which just went straight into most of the rugby budget at the time.
Happy days.
Yeah, they did bring in then a new director of sport who was basically there to stop him spending any more money on rugby. They've had a great time. They've got a really successful rugby program at the moment.
Cool. So it's an interesting point. Coming from a fully professional environment, is it then easy to just transfer that into a school system?
Absolutely not. We were really, really lucky. All 3 of us were there at a time when the headmaster and governors said, let's push the rugby. Or that's what we would believe that they were saying. Maybe it was just in our heads. So that meant the culture we were trying to bring in and trying to make everything slightly more professional, make everything as professional as possible for the players at the top of their game, but also looking at coach development and the whole rugby programme, where these kids are coming from, community outreach stuff. It meant that we could look at all of that and have a strategic vision for all of that.
Yeah.
And what we were doing wasn't clashing what a director of sport was doing, what a headmaster was doing, what the governors at the school wanted. So there wasn't then that clash in values and culture, because we had that, yes, go for it. Let's try and push the rugby for the moment. So there was a big influx, and you have to start from somewhere. So there was one team that did get a load of sports scholarships, but after that we kind of lived off the success of that team to then get the new players in and really sold it as, hey guys, like, we're here to coach. There's no other school in the area that has 3 extra professionals in all the time, and we were getting some of our friends to come in and coach on the occasion for when you got big cup games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we really got the green light to go ahead with that vision, and there was no clash between what we were trying to do and what everyone was expecting and wanting. So at that time it was a really nice sort of symbiotic relationship with the school where everyone was working towards the same goal. But then hockey and cricket suddenly went, well, hang on.
We want some of
that. So then it got a little bit muddled, because then the school's goal was to win a national title in any sport.
Okay.
But they weren't being particular on what sport they wanted to win it in. So obviously it's hard to win a national title in whatever sport you're doing. I think they did manage it in the end with potentially water polo or maybe indoor hockey. Right. But it meant that it took away from what we were trying to do in rugby, because they were saying if they went out and said, win us a national title in rugby, and you say, well, you need to do sports scholarship, you need to do this, you need to get in an S&C guy, and all this other stuff, and this is when we need to train. So we had priority for the first couple of years, but then other heads of sport sort of woke up to this and went, well, hang on, let's have more of an equality here. And I think it did benefit the school massively in the long term.
Yeah.
And I think they did succeed with their goal of winning a national title, but it wasn't in rugby.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. It sounds like you picked up a lot from your experience in the professional game, though, in terms of like management and planning and stuff like that, which made that successful, though.
I was also really lucky, as I said, when I went in, there was also a guy called Aaron Lineouts, who I owe a lot to and learned a lot from, and Alex Codlin was also there. So there were 2 guys there. Right. That Alex Codlin had been there 5 years, Aaron Lineouts had been there two or 3 years, and I just come in. So I learned a hell of a lot from those guys.
Yeah.
And expectation management was a massive thing, and the fact that you're not working in a professional environment. These are kids that want to have fun at weekends. On the Saturday, and the parents want to come along and watch them have fun, and it's hard to balance the expectations, what they're doing with the parents, to the expectations of you need to go out and win a national title, and things like that.
So that's an interesting question, actually, because obviously during that sort of age range, that's a key time for player development. How much was there a pressure on winning, or was the focus more on player development, or was the focus more on having fun?
I think our coaching philosophy changed a lot throughout the time we were there. When we first got there, it did need an injection of let's make this as professional as possible.
Okay.
And after we'd sorted out the top of it, we then started looking at everything else that we're doing with rugby. So, for instance, I wrote a S&C program for just basic movements that all the pupils were going to do in their PE lessons, which meant that we then didn't have to take care of basic movements and stuff and movement patterning in S&C sessions and in rugby sessions.
Yeah.
I mean, we did also just carry on building on that, but it meant that, and this wasn't a short-term thing, this was kind of 3 years down the line, let's make sure we've got all of this implemented. So we looked at that. We also looked at all the video analysis stuff, and we looked at sports scholarships. And we actually changed the way that we were doing sports scholarships quite a lot. We stopped bringing in as many rugby players that were really good at that age group, and we started doing athletic testing.
Right.
So we started looking at, can this pupil move properly? Can they react to games they've never been in before? So we put them in a multi-sport sort of scenario. What's their power and movement, and what are they like at that sport?
Right.
But we did a lot of athletic testing, and some of the guys that we've done athletic testing with and brought in through sports scholarships went on to do really, really well. And they played across a number of sports rather than just bringing a rugby player, he plays rugby, bringing a cricketer, they play cricket, bringing an athlete that's coachable and that is good at multi-sport and has good hand-eye coordination that can move properly, and he's going to be playing every sport. Yeah. So everyone's a win-win there.
Amazing. So did you design a lot of that process yourself and the testing games and things like that?
It was a really good culture at that school that I was at. There was a lot of guys that had come from professional sports or had come from top level stuff. So there was a guy that had played GB hockey or Wales hockey, can't remember which one. There was a load of good hockey players, load of good cricketers, load of good rugby players, and just some really good blokes that were really into sort of the pedagogy behind how kids learn and what they're doing, which is something I've now picked up on quite a lot. And I've more transitioned into the teaching side of things, but I also do coaching. Right. Whereas back in those days, I was a full-on sports coach essentially. So it was really interesting sitting down and working out with all these guys. But I would like to say the S&C thing was me saying we need to test these guys for sort of athletic ability. Yeah. Because it came out of sitting in a meeting after we've just done all the scholarships, and everyone's saying, well, this guy's really good, but he's also really quick, and this guy's fantastic at hockey, but and it was like, well, hang on, why can't we have a medium where they have an individual score for their individual sport plus an athlete score? And we essentially worked out a system which then made it sort of fair.
As fair as you possibly can.
As fair as you possibly can.
Scientific.
Sort of thing.
Scientifically fair.
I mean, we try to.
Okay, so how would you describe yourself as a coach then? And also as a coach now compared to when you first started coaching?
So I think even everyone's coaching, I would hope, has moved on in the last 10 years. When I first came out, I was very didactic. I was very instructive of what to do. In my head, because it's the way I was taught, there was a specific way of doing things to the best of your ability, and it meant that you did it in this way, and this is how you do line-out lifting. This is when they land, you land in a split stance with a whatever bind, and all the rest of it. Over the years, my view on that sort of thing has changed quite a bit. I think there's still some areas of the game where you do need to be really specific, and you also have to be really safe.
Like what, for example?
Tackle technique, scrums, but basically whenever there's big contact, ruck time. You've seen the laws adapt with the game, and so your coaching should also adapt and be reactive to that, but not in just a way of, oh, there's a new law. It's, hang on, let's make sure the players know how to do things safely, because ultimately we're trying to look after their safety and making sure they enjoy it. So my drill, I think I would have done a lot of drills when I first started, and I think there is definitely still a place for that, because you get skills by repeating drills under pressure. But now I do let the players have their own goals for games. We sit down with them at the start of the season, work out if they want to do, what do they want to be known for as a team. Right. So, like, what are your strengths? Because I might not have seen them last season. Yeah. I get a new team every season. I have usually got an eye on what they're doing, but what is their strengths? Tell me what your strengths are. We'll work out and we'll work a game plan for your strengths. what do we want our measures of success to be? Do we want to go for an unbeaten season? Okay, what do we learn from that if we do want an unbeaten season? Ultimately, I want them to work out that they probably don't want that as a goal. They want to do something that's more based on how they're playing, or like key performance indicators of the style or their strengths, or to plug a couple of their weaknesses, or just something that they identify how we want to be known for really good transition play.
Yeah.
So, okay, how are we going to put a measure on that?
And how many players actually do come up with something like that? Because it's so easy for them to just say, I want to win.
But you'll be surprised, because the amount of players now coming through academy setups and have already had that injected into them is quite high in the teams that I've coached in.
Yeah.
So there's always been 2 or 3 academy players in those teams. And then when you're having these conversations, it's not sort of you're at the front and all the players are sort of just looking at you and you're at a whiteboard. You're giving them the whiteboard. They've got the whiteboard. You might be at the back of the room, or you might have just written it up. And it's also interesting observing what they are doing, because that's mainly your role as a coach, is just to observe.
Yeah.
I don't buy into. I've coached some guys that don't say anything on game day. After the initial kind of, right, let's get up for this and do your thing, they then won't say anything on game day.
Right.
I think every opportunity is a learning opportunity. Sometimes I'll just go onto the pitch and listen to what the players are saying. Sometimes I'll go on and say, do you want any info on anything? Or I might go up to one specific player and say, have you thought about doing this? But I very rarely go, right, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
Unless there are certain situations where I would do that. Cup rugby is one of them. So Cup rugby, you got the under 15 NatWest competition and various under 18 competitions. That's Cup rugby. The goal that day is to win. All the other, and it's really nice because all the other games can just be leading into one of those cup fixtures.
Right.
So it's very much of, what do the players want to get out of that game? When's our next cup game? What are we building towards? What do we want to have in place for those cup games?
Yeah, so you've got a nice little sort of rhythm to the season there, where you can kind of build up and peak to a cup game, and then hopefully if you win it, you'll get another one in a few weeks' time.
So I'm currently coaching the under 15s at the moment for the school I'm at, and the goal is always to get to after Christmas. It's Cup rugby, anything can happen. Be as prepared as you possibly can be for that game of rugby on that day, and then it's up to those guys on the pitch.
Yeah. And I'm just interested in the players that are coming through now that might have an eye on becoming professional. What do you see in them? Do you see the same type of people that you were when you were coming up, or are they completely different animals now?
I think a lot of the guys that went professional when I was coming through were just really, luckily, good rugby players. I mean, I worked really hard at it. I was never the guy I never got picked for sevens.
Yeah. Not once.
Not once. But a lot of the guys were just fantastic rugby players, and the academies kind of thought, right, I'm going to grab these guys, put them in a professional environment, give them with full-time S&C coaches. They're going to bulk up. They're going to get quicker, faster, stronger. We're going to teach them the moves we want to, and then we'll see how they progress from there. That's already happening from the age of 13.
Yeah.
So academies are already looking at players at that age. And the public school and independent school sector also kind of helps that, because they also want to pick up the best rugby players, because ultimately most of the time rugby's played by independent schools or public schools plus clubs.
Yeah.
But if you're a good enough player, when you go coming through, you also get picked up for sixth form for one of the big the really big public schools. So those guys are already doing that and kind of in that mentality, and that's why you can now have those conversations that I was having when I first got to Quins at under 18 or 19 with under 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
So they're so much more switched on. They know how to manage their bodies a little bit better. But ultimately, so that because they are doing so much more rugby and they're evolving it more seriously from a younger age, you've got to make it more fun for them.
Yeah.
Because if we just did the drills that I did coming through when I was 14, stand in the line, pass the ball, stand out 5 meters away to tackle.
Yeah. Hold that bag.
They're going to get switched off. They're going to get switched off by it, and you do sometimes see that by guys playing up a little bit. So if you've got a really unsuccessful under 16-year-old that is playing up, they probably need really careful management, because they're going to be playing top flight schoolboy rugby for 3 years, and that takes it out of you.
Yeah.
So what's the mental pressures on them in that second and third year, or even that first year? Are they also playing up for their academy? Do they play any club rugby? what's the picture looking like? Are they playing representative stuff? So that's why the clubs have also got a lot better at getting in contact with schools, and most of the clubs want their players to be at either the Ace Academy stuff, or they want them to be in one of the top independent schools, because they have that friendship with them.
Yeah.
And they talk, and they can sort out physio and actually manage players better.
Yeah. Something you just picked up on there, which I think is super key, and I think it's becoming more and more thought about now, is this element of fun in the game. And what are some of the things that you do as a coach to try and, just bring that fun element and make sure that players are really enjoying every session?
Well, look, if they're in control of what they're doing, hopefully they're not going to pick something which is really boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have to go down that track.
Yeah.
But they don't want to get absolutely smashed on a Saturday as well. So they're usually quite good at working out what they aren't great at, what they need to fix, what do we need to look at.
Yeah.
But also, what is the culture within that team? Because some teams can start losing and get really nasty with each other, and then it's no fun for anyone. Some teams can start losing and pull together. I haven't worked out how you install that as a culture. But it's really interesting, the dynamics that these kids have, and the transition from sort of under 13, 14 to 15, because that first game of under 15 Cup rugby is probably the most intense rugby game that those kids have been in.
Yeah.
And how are they going to cope under that pressure, and what have you done to put them under that pressure already as a coach in training to make sure they aren't going to fall apart. But as we've seen, even at top flight international level, it can happen.
It can happen.
It can happen. But ultimately, if the kids are in charge of what they are, they're not going to pick something boring. But you as a coach, you still have to carry on making those skills exciting. So what games are you going to put them in? How are you going to get them to be competitive with each other? Are you going to swap it over? You have to look at, are you managing a B's and C's team? Are you managing a huge squad? What's that going to look like? Are you going to break out into A's and B's? Is the A team players going to get frustrated with C team players if you mix them all together?
Yeah.
Or what does that frustration look like? And is it good for them to actually be put in that situation? But essentially, more games are better.
Yeah.
We used to, as coaches, have little challenges. So only have 5 minutes of standing time in a session.
Right.
So someone would be there on a stopwatch.
Yeah.
The other guys would be coaching. Like, you hand over your stopwatch. You start it when when one of the other coaches starts talking, and you stop it when they stop talking. Or you can do it with coaches talking, or you can do it with players and coaches talking. Because that's always nice when players also talk, rather than just being told what to do by the coaches. Yeah. But essentially, get the boys moving as much as possible. Get them having fun, and the more fun they have, the more likely they're going to carry on doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the stopwatch for the coach talking, because, well, you don't want the players standing around for too long. B, it's quite easy to ramble as a coach. So having that little measure there just it forces you to be really succinct and direct with exactly what you're trying to say, and think about it before you actually start delivering something.
Yeah, massively. And I mean, do you need to give them the answer, or have they already come up with the answer? Someone in that circle has probably already come up with the answer, and it would be more helpful if they could do that every time, which then does give you the luxury of not having to go in and tell them what's happening every stoppage. And you can just go in and listen and work out what they're doing. But essentially, I think the more they're enjoying it, the better. We changed, going back to that first school I was at, we very much changed what we measured as success. We started looking at success as how many, what was our win percentage? Have we won that national cup yet? Mm-hmm. By the end of it, and this is something that actually the guy that came in, the director of sport, we owe a lot to him looking at it in this way. And we were obviously looking at it in a professional way. He was looking at it with a wider vision, and he said, this year you've had this many people play rugby for you. And it's like, wow, actually that's really cool.
Yeah.
Last year you only had this many. So actually, those C and D team boys that were probably starting to opt out after week 3, they're carrying on doing it because they're now having fun. And that means that hopefully the coaching at C and D team has got better. So it's just looking at that whole package, really. So we started looking at how many people are playing rugby in that school. And then year on year. And then we started looking at, which is something you brought up earlier, how many people were playing rugby after school.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the next thing to tackle, isn't it? Yeah. Where's that gap gone from playing for your school team, which for some guys now that's the biggest honour they're going to have in rugby, playing for that school team, especially if they're big schools. where are they going to go afterwards? Are they going to like the culture at uni rugby? Are they going to like the culture at club rugby? What does that look like then moving into that?
Yeah, and how to tie that together somehow.
Yeah.
So you did measure that as well. How many players then went and started playing?
Yeah, it's slightly harder. Obviously, you got to rely on your alumni teams and stuff like that, but it wasn't a great percentage.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't a great percentage, and it's something that the current school I'm at, we have recognised and we've said we do want to tackle it.
Yeah.
And we started tying up with the old boys club. We started inviting the old boys players back. After Christmas, we started suggesting some of our players go and play at the old boys club and things like that. Because we're only really one term rugby and then sevens.
Right. Yeah. So that's great. So you're kind of looking at the game as a bigger thing, and for the lads, something that will hopefully impact them for the rest of their lives, and certainly through sort of adulthood.
Yeah, definitely. And you have to look at all the players, even if that third team player who may not school third team player may not ever play rugby again, but has he liked it so much that he's going to go and support his local team, or he's going to go to a couple of the bars matches, or he's going to go to sevens matches? Have you instilled a love for what you are transferring to those kids? And that's essentially what it comes down to. Have you instilled a love of rugby in those players? Do they want to turn up to training? Do they want to play on Saturdays? Do they want to play after school? Or do they just want to go watch rugby?
Yeah. Any of those would be great, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, it massively helps if the kids that you're trying to coach have actually bothered to go and watch some rugby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then they have an idea of what's going on with it.
Yeah. So during your coaching stuff, you must have done a bit of refereeing as well, I would say.
Done some refereeing, yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, we're gonna move on to the rugger law bore section.
Oh God. Okay.
How would you rate your knowledge of the laws, Jingles?
I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's just a bit of fun, as I always say. Nobody knows all the laws. I'm certain of that, and we'll see how you go here. I've given you, I think, for you, quite a kind question.
Okay.
So with that in mind, James Inglis, it's time to find out if you are a rugger law bore.
Sir, are you sure that's correct?
Here's your question. And it's to do with a line out, which I'm pretty sure you know probably more about than anything. There are 5 ways that a line out can end. Can you name them all?
So let's try and go for some obscure one. So ball moves over the 15.
Yep.
Ball moves off the mark.
Yep.
Ball is passed back out of the line out.
Yep.
Is it going to be something? Are they the? Do I get a hint?
Those are those are 3 of the key ones.
Those 3 are the key ones.
There's one more that I think is quite obvious, and then the last one's a little bit more shady.
Is it not straight? But that doesn't really count. Because
Doesn't really count. Yeah.
That's kind of play on until if it goes not straight the other way. So you can catch it, maul it off the mark.
Yep.
That means the line out's over. You can catch it, pass it back.
Yep.
You can throw it over the 15.
Yep.
The ball can not go 5.
Oh, okay, close. It's if the ball if you get it at the front of the line out, and then the ball goes into the 5 metre area.
Yeah. Okay.
So if the ball ends up going into the 5 metre area.
Yeah, if you move outside of the 15.
Yep.
Or 5.
So that's 4 of them.
If you head the ball forward.
We'll call that leaving the line of play.
Leaving the line of play. Is it going to be something like if a guy puts his knee down in control of the ball?
It's kind of like that.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, kind of.
I'm struggling.
Right. Okay. Well, it's. I'm going to call you a rugger law bore, though, Jingles, because I think you've basically nailed it. Really, the last one is if the ball comes unplayable. So I'm guessing that means if the ball's caught in the line out and a maul set a maul and that collapses without having moved off the mark.
Right. Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen that happen.
You get those lovely scrums which just sit there for 25 seconds. I've never seen a line out maul not go anywhere.
Yeah, just be like. No, nothing happening. So just to confirm, James Inglis, you are a rugger law bore.
Yes, I can wear my refereeing top and run around on a school rugby pitch on a Saturday blowing a whistle then.
Yeah, with full pride. Okay, on to the Stache question. So what is the favourite bit of Stache that you've ever received?
Weirdly enough, I used to really like the beanies that we would get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. I had some cracking beanies over the years. Favourite one's probably the Esher Rugby
Yeah.
one. That was a pretty good stash. The piece of stash I wanted when leaving Roslyn Park was the Roslyn Park gilet, but
Right.
never got it. I think you had to score a hat trick to get the gilet.
What? That's harsh.
Yeah,
That's harsh for front five players.
I know. We should just have to make
You should give it for
one try a
yeah,
season.
or
There
just
you go.
pushing hard in scrums.
Pushing hard.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And what is your favourite kit of all time? This can be any team from any era.
So I was having a Google on the way up here, and I do like the Stad kit from when they first went pink and they
Yeah.
had the flowers on it.
Yeah.
That's probably up there.
Yeah.
Before they got too leery, because then also looking at the Stad kit, they've had some shockers over the years, haven't they? I mean, I know they have that pink and purple theme, but
Yeah.
wow.
Some of them are, yeah.
So, yeah. But art deco faces on the front of it. That was interesting.
That's a good one. Yeah. Okay, cool. So Stade Francais with the flowers. And what is your current stash crush, or is there a kit that you think is horrific and should never be seen again?
Ooh. I think it's more of a style thing. I get lucky enough to go on tours with some of the schools that I coach, and I get some of the kit, but really the kit is for the players.
Right.
And I've ended up with some cotton tracky bees, which have got elasticated bottoms, and I'm sure the boys put it off really well with their sliders. But for what is now a middle-aged man, it's not a good look. So I'm gonna go with the latest trend of having elasticated cotton jogging bottoms.
Oh, yeah, that sounds bad. Have you not got a special, like, coaches?
Oh, you get a
uniform?
couple of things with coaches,
Yeah.
but you also get some of that stuff. And
Yeah.
some of it's just like, not going to be wearing that.
Maybe not. Okay, mate. Well, listen, that's brought us to an end. It's been brilliant seeing you here and catching up and chatting everything rugby. If people want to get hold of you, how might they best do that?
Probably through Instagram or just on email. Not sure who's going to want to grab me. But
Well, you never know. You know, people might want some coaching inspiration or something like that.
see me out on the sideline.
Yeah.
I'll be the big grumpy guy that's not talking to his players.
Okay, well, we'll link all that up in the show notes for you guys. And mate, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Tommy.
Thanks very much again to Jingles. I love talking to people who think deeply about the game, and that certainly applies here. Now, if you got something out of this podcast, you could help other people find it by giving it a rating or leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. I'll be back with you next week when my guest will be James Waterhouse. Moose, as he is known to everybody, is a former teammate of both Jingles and myself from Esher RFC. He has now transitioned from rugby to be a broadcasting professional for none other than the BBC. So tune in next week to hear what a true professional sounds like. Right, these websites aren't going to build themselves. And don't forget, if you need a website, I've been building sites for over 20 years. So please get in touch on email, hello@amateurrugbypodcast.com. But until then, get out and play.